if you're going to your local cafe and you're taking a reusable coffee cup and you're the only one in that line of 10 people that's got your reusable coffee cup, you are an inadvertent reminder to 9 people to remember their reusable coffee cup the next day.
Think a quote that drives me in my own nonprofit initiatives is like, you may not be able to give everything that the world needs, but the world needs everything that you can give. Hi, Lottie. Welcome to the Go Girl podcast. I'm super excited to have you here, and congratulations on making it to the Forbes 30 under 30 list.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here and chatting with you.
Perfect. I have read a lot about your company, Banish, and I love companies and products that are sustainable first. And I just want to know, how did this journey start? How did you get the idea to start Banish?
Yeah, so I had the idea over 6 years ago now. I had a very long list of New Year's resolutions, as we all do. And one of them was to run a half marathon, another one was to learn Spanish, and one of them was just to do better for the planet. I didn't really know exactly what that entailed, but I knew that I could be doing more as an individual. And it wasn't probably until like February that I was really starting to take my New Year's resolution seriously. And I thought, well, I was about to wake up, and when I woke up in the morning, I was going to make a smoothie at home. And in that smoothie, I was going to put a single use plastic straw. And I was like, okay, well, I know that that isn't a great use of plastic. So, what can I do that's more sustainable? So, I just threw in like a simple Google search, which was just best sustainable straw. And there was hundreds of thousands of options that came back, but there was no simple or easy answer. It was like, well, if you have a bamboo straw, you could have a stainless steel straw, or silicone straws, or wheat straws, or glass straws. There was just too many options, and it was just completely overwhelming and confusing. I was working as a journalist, so I did love research. So I did all of the research looking at kind of life cycle assessments, where they were made, how long they would last, all of these kinds of things that the everyday person wouldn't want to do. And eventually I decided to buy a set of sustainable stainless steel straws. And a couple of days later, they arrived. I purchased from what I thought was a sustainable organization, and they came individually wrapped in plastic.
Yeah.
And it was just this kind of moment where I was just really pissed off, to be honest, really frustrated because I'd spent my money and my time on what I thought was a sustainable cause. But I didn't really let myself sit in that for too long because I went, well, I can't be the only one that wants to do more. I was doing way more research, and I was realizing how much we needed to act in terms of climate change and the planet, but there was just no actionable steps and tools to do that. So I thought, well, why not use my skills as a journalist to break down all of these complex studies and information, tell people or teach people how they can reduce their waste and live more sustainably, but also connect them with brands and businesses that are doing the right thing for the planet. So that was when I thought of the idea for Banish and just really got started.
Wow, that is amazing. Just the fact that it all started from like a New Year's resolution that most of us do not stick with is amazing. So, like, you're the end result of what happens when you actually stick with your New Year's resolution. That is amazing. So, what kind of offerings does Banish currently have that help with this situation?
Yeah, so we see ourselves as having three main pillars, and those are education, so teaching people actionable steps and tips that they can take in order to reduce their impact. We have a retail platform, so we're a marketplace for different Australian small brands and businesses, most of which are female founded and female led. And then we also have our recycling program, Brad, which is how we give back to our community.
That sounds amazing. So, I read that Banish is a B Corp. Can you tell me a bit about what exactly that means?
Yes, so a B Corp certification is pretty much like a global standard that certifies that a business is actually doing good. So what B Corps have to do is, in order to achieve certification, you have to go through a really rigorous certification process, which looks at everything from kind of where you source your products to the percentage of people in your organization that are women, to how much you're paying your staff, to what kind of energy providers you use to turn the lights on. It goes into this really granular detail, and you get an overall score. And in order to be a B Corp certified business, you have to score over 80. So we've been a B Corp now for over 3 years, which means that we're up to, it's now time for us to recertify. So you have to go through the process again every 3 years, and you actually have to improve on that score, because the whole
Mhm.
thing with sustainability is that it's not set, and it's not kind of like this tick box, is it's current, it's always evolving, and that's what the certification does.
Wow, so it's like businesses that are both for profit but also take care of like the impact, their impact on sustainability and like just being good for humanity in general. That is great. I would love to dive into the impact that Banish has had till now. Like, how much waste have you guys recycled?
Yeah, so through the Brad program, which is our, as I mentioned before, a way that we give back. So pretty much what happens is that individual households send us their recycling in the mail. It's a bit of a bizarre concept, but we receive thousands of shoe boxes every single month. And inside these boxes will be things that can't go in a traditional recycling bin, like pill packets, beauty products, coffee pods, plastic toothbrushes. So what happens is we receive all of these items, and then they get separated and sorted into the different waste streams so that they can then be recycled by different Australian micro recyclers. And we also recycle some of the streams ourselves in house. So to date, we have received over 20 tonnes of waste from around Australia.
Wow.
We could only accept waste from different Australian households because of our carbon footprint. And we have recycled over 2.7 million pill packets, or blister packs is what we call them.
That is amazing. You're doing so much for the planet. It is amazing. So, can you also like tell me a bit about our regular household products that are more difficult to sort of recycle that maybe consumers should try and stay away from?
Yes, I think it's difficult because every single country recycles very differently. But generally speaking, the items that are the most difficult to recycle are those that are made from multiple different types of materials. So, say, for example, if you have a shampoo bottle or a body wash bottle that comes with a pump, in that pump will be probably two types of plastic, and then also a metal spring that's what causes the pump functionality. So because that, you've got three types of materials, so that makes a product really difficult to recycle. It's the same with the pill packets that we specialize in. There is a thin layer of aluminium, but then also a PVC, generally speaking, plastic. So to separate those two materials so that the aluminium can go to the aluminium recycler and the plastic can go to the plastic recycler requires an extra level of processing. Whereas if you were to put a single use plastic water bottle into a recycling bin, that's one clear type of plastic. So that's why we have to process these items differently, and why they can't go into curbside recycling bins.
Wow, that is complicated. And you wouldn't imagine like the layers of complexity in simple household products like that. And this seems to be like a big issue, right? Like climate is a big topic right now. We hear about microplastics, we hear about sea organisms ingesting plastics. We get those pictures of like baby turtles with plastics all around them. So can you dive a bit into like how big of an issue is this actually? Like how bad is plastic for the environment?
Yes, I think it was last week a study came out that actually they've found microplastics now not only in seabirds but in human fetuses, so in pregnant women, but in feces, so in poo.
Wow.
And then last week they found it in testes. So it is literally everywhere, and it's in the air we breathe, the food we eat, the water we drink. It is often unavoidable, these types of microplastics, but what we can do as a society is we can reduce our consumption so that we can reduce our consumption of big plastics so that they don't ultimately end up in microplastics. So it's things like when you've got textiles or clothing, anything with polyester is a type of plastic. So when you are wearing a t-shirt that's ultimately made from plastics, you're breathing in that plastic. Every time you go to wash it in your washing machine, hundreds of thousands of microplastics break off and go into the waterways. And then when you're ultimately finished with that piece of clothing and you put it in landfill, then that landfill, it's going to break down into smaller pieces of plastic. And the issue is that a microplastic is defined as something that is a piece of plastic that is smaller than 5 millimeters in size. So sometimes it's so small that we can't even see it. So it's quite scary. So I feel like when it comes to the microplastics discussion and debate within the world, it's one of these things that it's so difficult and it's so hard for us to make a change on a microscopic level. But what I love to let people know is that as an individual, there are so many ways that you can reduce your consumption of plastics in general. It could be things like when you were reheating your food, reheating it in a glass container instead of a plastic one. It can be using reusable water bottles or reusable coffee cups. It's all of these small and simple things which seem so insignificant, but in the long run, they actually make such a big impact. If we come back to those pumps and sprays in the body wash in your shower, if we look at our grandparents or our great grandparents, like there was no plastic in their shower at all.
Mm.
It was a good old fashioned bar of soap. That bar of soap probably did their hair and also their body, which you don't have to these days because we do have shampoo bars. But it's again, it's all of these things that we've advanced so far in so many different ways, but we also sometimes need to go back to using those old school methods. And it's not always innovation that's going to save us. Sometimes it's just slowing down and going a couple of steps backwards.
Yeah, I think with increasing consumption and just the way the consumer trends are going, we're just consuming and producing so much more than decades ago. So it is crazy. It kind of scares me, like the steps I should take to sort of make the world a more sustainable place. But then I feel like at an individual level, maybe what I'm doing is not enough. What do you think about that? Because there's a lot of debate around that we're past that point where individual changes can help, and now we need like more systemic changes and something that makes it like much easier for us to incorporate in our daily lives. So, do you have any opinions on that?
Yeah, I think it's something that I'm asked about a lot because I'm a really big believer in the collective power of individuals in creating change. And I think that it can feel insignificant when you go and you use your reusable water bottle or you swap to a bar of soap or something like that. But for me, I think you have to remember the important part that you play in the cogs of society. Say, for example, you going to the supermarket and purchasing an item made that, like a bar of soap rather than a plastic bottle. You are showing that supermarket chain, which in Australia is huge, that you would like more options when it comes to products that don't come in plastic packaging. If we had 10,000 people purchasing bars of soap over 10,000 people buying plastic body wash bottles, it would create a huge impact and a huge change, not only from the amount of plastics that we're not consuming, but also that retailer would ultimately change because they survive based on consumer habits. So if you're going to start changing, then they're going to have to quickly adapt and evolve. The same goes with governments. They are changing. It is slow and it is tedious and it is frustrating. But I think that eventually they will catch up to what we as individuals are doing. The beauty is of being an individual, you can just go out there and make that change. You don't have to get things approved by 10 different stakeholders. So, my biggest advice is that, yes, as one person, it can feel very small and it can feel like you're not making an impact. But when it's a collective group of individuals, we are making a far bigger change. And for me, what I like to remind people is, say, for example, if you're going to your local cafe and you're taking a reusable coffee cup and you're the only one in that line of 10 people that's got your reusable coffee cup, you are an inadvertent reminder to 9 people to remember their reusable coffee cup the next day. Doesn't mean that you need to go up to every single one of them and tell them that they're a terrible human being and that they need to remember their coffee cup. But inadvertently, you're becoming a role model without doing anything. And I think that's the biggest thing that we can do. Is one of my favorite quotes by Gandhi is, be the change that you want to see in the world and really lead by example. And it doesn't mean standing on a box and yelling and telling everybody about it. It just means following your passions and following your beliefs and actually standing for them and actually making changes, even though you can often feel like you're the minority. There's so many other people around the world that are doing the same thing, and together I really believe that we're making an impact and we're not so much the minority anymore. When I started 6 years ago, nobody was talking about sustainability. The
Mhm.
word sustainability was barely even known, and now it's front and center. And I think it's one of these things that it's only going to keep increasing. It's not going away anytime soon.
That is amazing and powerful. I think a quote that drives me in my own nonprofit initiatives is like, you may not be able to give everything that the world needs, but the world needs everything that you can give. So I definitely believe in the power of individual impact, and demand definitely like defines the supply. So if we change, the industry will have to change. So this is amazing, the work that you're doing. I want to switch tracks a bit and talk about you as a young female entrepreneur, and how did Banish come about? What were the challenges that you faced in the early days of starting this business?
Yeah, I think there were lots of challenges, and there always is. I think that's the thing. It doesn't ever get easier. The challenges just change, and the hurdles change, and the problems change. Um, but I think for me, two things that I struggled with were not only being a woman, but also being young. I was
Mm-hmm.
23 when I started Banish, and in that sense, it really was difficult for me to be taken seriously. It still is difficult for me to be taken seriously, but what I found was, especially when you're trying to do something new that not many people have done before in an industry that is very male dominated, I would go to so many different networking events. I love talking to people. I love getting out there and chatting with people. That's something where I really thrived. So when I first started and I was working by myself, I found it really difficult being alone. So I would go to all of these different events and I would be the only female and the only person under the age of 30. And that was difficult, but at the same time, I think I just rephrased it or reframed it in my head as an opportunity. These people were all trying to talk to this demographic that was traditionally difficult to talk to and difficult to reach and difficult to connect with. And I had the unique point of being that demographic. I knew what they wanted to hear, I knew what they were looking for. All of my friends were that, I was that. So I kind of used it as my superpower, and that's how we're still going today. Is the whole fact with Banish is that it's relatable, it's easy to understand. I'm very open with the challenges and the struggles that we're going through as an organization, and I think that ultimately helps people relate to us more, rather than being this poised, beautiful, flashy brand that everybody goes, well, that's beautiful, but they don't actually understand the why behind it. So I think it did take a while for me to understand, and to not understand, but to push through what I saw was a traditional barrier and see it as a superpower, but I'm glad that I did.
Yeah, I think every startup founder that I've talked to, it's like the journey is lonely, but there needs to be like a very strong core motivation, something that drives you. So, what is that driving force for you, Lottie? Like, I know the New Year resolution started it, but what is keeping you going?
Ultimately, I want to help people. That's always been it from day dot. I didn't study sustainability at university. I actually studied a degree in media and nutrition, which is completely bizarre. But even doing that, I knew that ultimately, whatever role I ended up in, I wanted to be able to help people. And I think for me, that's what we're doing every day with Banish is we get to help people. And it's the letters that we receive from people inside their shoeboxes of their recycling. It's the DMs on Instagram. It's the messages of support. For me, knowing that I can have an impact on so many people's life is one of the things that keeps me going.
That is amazing. And honestly, I really appreciate everything that you are doing for the planet. Were there any moments of like self-doubt where I know you were in a male-dominated industry? So, like, how did you deal with those feelings of self-doubt and just powering through those moments where you're like, maybe I'm not enough, or maybe like a big challenge came up and you wanted to quit? Like, what were those days like?
I don't think I've ever wanted to quit. Naively, I'm just so driven on what we're doing and I understand the need. I can see the need for it so easily. But I think for me, often the times when I'm finding it really difficult and I'm finding it hard to find a solution for a problem or an issue is when I ultimately need to take a step back. And I know that can sound so counterintuitive, but sometimes when you're so thick and deep in the problem, it's really hard to see the solution. So for me, it's as simple as I'm a very big ocean swimmer, so it'll be something like going for a really big swim or going for a walk outside or taking a whole day off, which I know sounds so ridiculous. But for me, it's often then that I find the solutions for the issues. And I think that's the biggest thing is sometimes it's kind of like you're trying to put a round peg in a square hole and you just keep on trying and trying and trying and it's not from a lack of trying that it's not working, it's a lack of you're not approaching it from the right angle. So for me it's really stepping back in order to go forward, which sometimes feels ridiculous and feels like something you shouldn't do. I think that's probably the biggest thing for me. There's always self doubt, to be honest. I'm forging a new pathway. There's no one that I can look to go, oh, well, what did you do last time? Oh, when you had this problem, how did you get through that? There is no one who's done this before, which is really exciting, but it's also terrifying at the same time.
Yeah, definitely. I think most of my solutions to my coding problems are usually in the shower or when I'm sleeping. So I completely get like stepping back from the problem, taking a minute, and then going back to it with a fresh mindset. So you're 6 years in the journey, and I'm sure you must have learned some lessons on the way. I would love to like hear some of those big learnings for other women who are maybe trying to start their own ventures or thinking about being an entrepreneur themselves.
Yeah, my gosh, I've got so many learnings. We could just sit here all day. I feel like I learn something new every day in the best way possible. I think the biggest learning is to always be learning. There's always so much that you can be evolving as an individual, and especially if you're leading an organization, the more that you grow as an individual, the more that the organization ultimately will grow. And if you are stagnant and stay in the same spot, then the organization will probably do the same. On that, my learnings are not very traditional. I am out there. It'll be talking to people. It'll be learning by listening to podcasts. I do love audiobooks, but I find I often don't have time to listen to the whole one. I just want the condensed version quite quickly. But it's also talking to other founders that aren't necessarily within my industry. I find that no matter whether it's a non-profit or an e-commerce business or an education platform or something completely different, I find that everybody in business in general has so many different perspectives and often so many different learnings that they can provide. So it's for me, it's chatting and connecting with them is how I learn the most. And I often as well learn directly from our community. So it pretty much from day one, I put out into Banish very raw, not perfect ideas and finished, well, not finished products, just products. And then I
Mm-hmm.
would so quickly change and evolve and adapt. And I feel like you would probably do the same from a coding perspective. Aiming for progress, not perfection, is another very big mantra of mine. And even with Brad, it was nowhere near perfect when I first launched it 3 years ago. But I just thought, well, let's put it out there and then let's grow and adapt it and evolve it. And let's change this and let's try this. And there's no perfect time and there's no 6 week marketing deadline. It's like, okay, let's do this week and see how it goes. And I think that's enabled us to really quickly learn, adapt, and evolve because we can kind of go, okay, well, it's not working. Let's change it. Let's do this now.
Yeah, that is so powerful, especially like progress over perfection. Because I think as women, also, we're steered towards perfection in the way we look, in the way we do things since we were children. So we tend to not take as many risks. But I'm totally for that. Like, it's time. That's how this podcast also started. I was like, one day, let me start this. And then I started emailing people. And I'm like, and here I am. Like, I've shot like 10 episodes by now. We're launching next month. So it is super exciting. I do want to know like what kind of podcast you listen to. Any recommendations for people starting their entrepreneurial journey or for self-help?
Ooh, good question because I feel like it changes all the time. I'm gonna have to look at my phone for this
Yeah.
one, because I feel like I get on like one podcast and like I become obsessed and I just listen to every single episode and I'm like, oh well, there's none more. I need to keep on finding new ones. I really like Female Founder World, which is
Hmm.
all obviously, as the name suggests, about female-led startups. That's a really good one. The other podcast that I've been getting into lately is called Working Hard, Hardly Working. I really like that
Mm.
one. And then let me see what the other one is.
Is there a
I
book by
also
that
dip
name?
in and
Working
out of
hard, hardly
listening to
working.
Diary
I
of a
feel like I've
CEO because I
heard that
feel
somewhere
like
before.
that one is really great from like a mindset perspective, whereas the other ones are more like a businessy tips kind of perspective. I also have an anti podcast recommendation as well, and that is what my friend and I call going for like a raw walk. And
Hmm.
it's when you literally go for a walk outside and you don't listen to anything. You do your commute and you just listen to your own thoughts. And I just have also found that to be super beneficial because I don't know about you, but sometimes I'm at work all day processing things, talking to people, sending out emails, and then I'm on the train. I might be on TikTok. I might be listening to that podcast. I might be doing anything. It's like, when is your time just to process everything and to think it
Hmm.
through? So also sometimes just in a weird way, like literally just stare out into the distance and just think.
Yeah, I think that sort of is neglected in today's world where we're like filled with so many distractions. Like when I go out for walks, I'm like, I should listen to a podcast because you need to be doing something constantly, learning something, and the whole hustle culture. But sometimes I just like to like go on walks and listen to the birds and not listen to anything. Instead, watch random people do random things because you do need that time to sort of relax. So that is a great tip. I think now that we have a term for it, I'm gonna tell that to other people that that's what I'm doing. Perfect.
Great.
So what is next for Banish? Like how are you planning to scale it up? What do you have in store for Banish now?
It's a really good question. And I think it's actually something that I'm not struggling with at the moment, but I'm in the weeds of really figuring out what's next. Because as I mentioned, we don't really have a trajectory to follow looking at somebody else's organization or business. We're kind of figuring it out on the way. And I feel like I'm spending the the current couple of months at the moment, trying to take a bit of a step back to look at what we've been doing, how we can improve it, and where we should ultimately be going from here. So, to be honest, I don't have any like teasers or anything fun or exciting to share with you. It's more just the fact that we will be doing things differently in the future. It's just, I'm not entirely sure what it looks like yet.
No, that is a great answer. You can have no answers right now and take this time to sort of like figure out what you want to do next and like step back and take your time. And we will be following Banish on your journey. So I will get to know whatever is next for you and I would love to share it with everybody else as well. So thank you so much for taking out the time for this podcast, Lottie. Thoroughly enjoyed our conversations. And like you said, you always learn from other leaders, whether it be from any industry. I think I learned a lot from you today. So thank you so much for that.
No, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it, and all the best on your journey as well.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Go Girl podcast. For more such inspiring conversations, do not forget to subscribe. You can also follow me on Instagram at Japnet Ahuja. Until next time, keep being unstoppable. You go, girl.